All right, so we're going into some serious spoiler territory here, in the sense that if you don't want, if you'd rather learn this about this in the adventure or what have you, then steer away. Oh my. Um, this video is focusing on the nature of the corruption, like what specifically it is in a very literal way. Um, and it's a bit of a weird one. So basically, I have to explain a few things before getting to the actual nature of the corruption itself. But one of the major themes of this world is that, to an extent, everything is alive. You will find a lot of living things where living things wouldn't usually be. Sometimes it gets a little bit of Flintstones, but hey. Um, we have living items like lanterns that are like literally bred creatures that produce light when fed oils and whatnot. And so what that means is in this world, matter at its tiniest level has some degree of consciousness. So if you imagine like molecules or atoms or something like that, you could imagine each of the pieces that make up you technically have their own individual consciousness. It doesn't mean much. Honestly, it's on such a small scale that they doesn't really have much self-awareness or anything like that, and your personal conglomerate consciousness overrides anything they want to do. But uh, there is something called the occult, and the occult is essentially an energy that allows you to manipulate the consciousness of things at that lowest level. Um, and so uh, the when you do that, stuff at the lowest level can do a bunch of different things as long as they are aware of themselves and are able and are aware of their own capabilities to do so. One of the most important things is that they can change themselves, they can multiply, they can even remove themselves entirely. For example, in a weird sort of way, if I used the occult to somehow talk to a few pieces of plastic molecules, in a sense, I could tell them, "Hey, your name is Plastic, right? Yeah, we're Plastic. I'm going to rename you to Gold." And they're like, "Yeah, Gold sounds great." And so they turn to gold, turn plastic into gold. Not that plastic really exists in this universe. Um, uh, and you could also say something like, "Make three more of you." And it's like, "Oh, sure thing, boss," and it makes three more. Um, and remember, this is at the lowest level, so it's not like a brick of plastic just randomly shows up or anything. Um, and so the occult is, like I said, is an energy that allows you to manipulate that lowest level consciousness. What the corruption is essentially a who it is this thing created by a powerful force or entity. Maybe I'll get into that in this video. Um, that is using occult energies to essentially create rogue consciousness. Sort of like, you know how I said the occult, you give instructions to something and then it does that thing. Well, the corruption is essentially about making those individual parts of yourself to a large degree self-aware, but not like they don't exactly have intelligence, just sort of a weird form of consciousness, and that causes them to just go ballistic. They don't really have a frame of mind. They don't have memories or anything like that. Instead, they just essentially the pieces of you go insane. They have an awareness of themselves that they don't understand. Um, and so they just replicate or produce or change at a rapid level, sometimes working in tandem with other insane pieces and producing what is known as the corruption, with like random limbs and whatnot growing out of your body and all sorts of stuff. Sometimes, if they get coordinated enough in a weird sort of order out of chaos kind of way, they develop more cleanly into less erratic forms. Um, but so technically, that's what the corruption is. It is a manipulation of the base level of consciousness created from some dark elder thing, um, using occult energies. Um, uh, so the dark elder thing, if I might as well go into that, it's the reason I called it a force is that it is technically it it's ugh this is where it gets tricky, and when I actually write this out for people, it's gonna be a challenge, uh but essentially it's just kind of the corruption. What is causing the corruption is a force of the world, in a sense like gravity, um, that isn't always there. Um, it sometimes pops up, and sometimes in small pockets. And it just so happens that the region that the adventure takes place in, for some reason, uh, had it pop up. There are many ways in which the corruption, or what causes the corruption, can seep into a part of the world. In this case, the source of the corruption was essentially created by oh god, this is gonna sound so awkward. But essentially created by a corrupted person from an alternate dimension who came through to here when she died. Um, and because even death isn't exactly simple. And so eliminating the source of the corruption is essentially eliminating that person who carried over the corruption from their world, is possibly the simplest way that I can explain it. Um, and she is she doesn't have a name. She has long lost her name. In fact, when you find her, you actually the only way you can actually begin to damage her is once you actually give her a name, like in a sense, almost verifying her existence. We have some weird philosophical stuff in the game, and ugh, uh, so, yes, if you kill the source of the corruption will no longer continue to seep into the world, or at least for a time. Um, and it, it's it's actually kind of an interesting choice, because over the time, um, the corruption isn't always a bad thing. The people who are immune to the corruption are essentially people who, for whatever reason or another, have a bit more. The pieces of their body have a bit more control over themselves, and your conglomerate consciousness has a bit more control over them. Um, and so that's why when they receive more corruption, they can, in a sense, almost direct their inner pieces to mutate in ways that are advantageous to them. And so some people want to use this power to evolve. They view this as an opportunity. The Warrens are all about evolution. Uh, they are all about survival and how you can progress yourself. And so, what better way to conquer the Warrens than to embrace them and essentially find any way you can to gain power over them. Whether or not that's a good idea, though, is up to you. Um, and I think I almost wish I was doing a stream of these videos so I could answer questions, because, hoo boy, I feel like there could be a lot of questions. But nonetheless, that's the way it is. So I think that covers the source of the corruption and the nature of the corruption itself. I'll see you next one.